You think seeing the future is just magic, but if we look at it through the lens of quantum mechanics, what Yhwach is actually doing is performing the most complex engineering feat in the history of the universe. He is manually collapsing the wave function of reality itself. We are going to take a very serious look at exactly how timeline manipulation works in the Bleach universe, specifically looking at it not as a magical ability but as a hard engineering problem. When we talk about the almighty or the power to change the future, we are really talking about quantum timeline engineering. This is a field that blends high level physics with information theory. The core idea here is feasibility. Is it actually possible to change the future? If so, what are the costs? We are going to break down the compact analysis and the scientific hurdles one by one. Think of this like building a bridge. You don't just wish for a bridge, you have to calculate the load, the materials, and the tension. Manipulating a multiverse is the same thing but on a cosmic scale. You have to account for energy, mass, and information. We are going to treat the Bleach universe as a closed system that follows specific rules, and we are going to see how those rules are bent, broken, or engineered around to achieve what looks like a miracle. This is about taking the mystical and making it mechanical. We want to understand the nuts and bolts of how a character like Yhwach or a device might actually reach into the gears of time and turn them. It is important to understand that we are looking at this from an analytical consulting group perspective. Imagine we have been hired to audit the powers of a god. We need to check their math. We need to see if their energy budget makes sense. This isn't just about who punches harder, it is about who has the better handle on the fundamental programming language of reality. We are analyzing the structure of the multiverse itself and how it reacts when someone tries to force it into a new shape. The first major hurdle in changing the future is a concept called unitarity. In quantum mechanics, the sum of all probabilities must always equal 1. That is a non-negotiable rule. If you have a coin flip, it is 50% heads and 50% tails. The total is 100% or 1. You cannot have 60% heads and 60% tails because that adds up to 1.2, and that breaks the universe. When Yhwach or any timeline manipulator changes the future, they are messing with these probabilities. The mechanism here is called universal wave function rotation. Imagine reality is a wave or a wave on a graph. The high points are things that are likely to happen, and the low points are things that are unlikely. To change history, you don't destroy the bad future, you just rotate the graph. You take the latent timeline, the one where you lose or die, and you push its probability down to 0. At the same time, you take the actualized timeline, the one where you win, and you push its probability up to 100%. This is a phase shift. You are reconfiguring the likelihood of events without actually deleting the energy of the universe. The total probability remains constant. It is like having a deck of cards. You don't burn the cards you don't want. You just shuffle the deck so the ace is always on top. The other cards still exist in the deck, but they are buried. This prevents reality from shattering. If you just deleted a timeline, you would violate conservation laws. Instead, you are effectively muting the timelines you don't like and amplifying the one you do. It's a volume control for existence. Now we have to look at the tools used to do this. We call this the universal quantum encoding framework. The entire universe can be thought of as information. Every atom, every soul, every event is just data. A bit is a 0 or a 1. A qubit is the quantum version that can be both at once. To manipulate the timeline, you have to encode the entire universe into qubits. We use logic gates to process this data. The first is the Hadamard gate. This creates a superposition. It takes a definite state like I am alive and turns it into a mixture of I am alive and I am dead. This is the moment a timeline branches. It opens the door to possibilities. Then you have C0 gates. These are conditional. They link branches together. If I step left in this timeline, then my enemy misses in that timeline. It entangles the outcomes. Finally, we have phase gates. This is the selection tool. This is the enter key on the keyboard. Once you have all these floating possibilities, the phase gate adjusts the weights. It makes one version heavy enough to become real. The processing power required for this is staggering. We are talking about 10 to the power of 122 operations per second. That is a 1 followed by 122 zeros. A human brain can do this. A supercomputer can do this. You effectively have to be a living quantum computer to process this much data. You need to see every grain of sand, every shifting atom, and calculate the outcome of each one simultaneously. This is where things get really difficult. The energy required to change the universe is astronomical. We are talking about the energy gap. The total energy of the observable universe is roughly 10 to the power of 70 joules. To manipulate the multiverse, you need vastly more than that, around 10 to the power of 126 joules. Conventional spiritual pressure isn't enough. It's like trying to boil the ocean with a match. So, how do you do it? The solution is false vacuum decay. The universe sits in a field called the Higgs field. Think of it like a ball sitting in a valley. We think we are at the bottom of the valley, which is zero energy. But what if we are actually on a ledge and there is a deeper valley below us? That is a false vacuum. If you can trigger a collapse, if you can push the ball off the ledge, it falls to the true vacuum. This fall releases energy, massive amounts of energy. A manipulator like Yhwach harvests this energy. He triggers a controlled collapse of the vacuum state, catches the energy released as reality tries to settle into a new state, and uses that power to fuel the timeline change. It is essentially using the potential energy of the universe itself as a battery. But the risk is catastrophic. If you drop the ball too hard, the new vacuum expands at the speed of light and erases existence entirely. You need God tier control to sip from this fire hose without drowning everyone. Physics has a strict rule: mass and energy cannot be created or destroyed. If you rewrite a timeline where a planet was destroyed and replace it with one where it wasn't, you suddenly have a planet's worth of mass that shouldn't be there. Or if you erase an enemy, where did their mass go? This is cosmic accounting. There is a mechanism called quantum branch energy balancing. The cosmic accountant or the manipulator must redistribute the energy. If you delete a galaxy in one timeline, you have to shove that equivalent energy into another timeline or disperse it as background radiation. You have to balance the scales. If you don't, you get gravitational anomalies. The universe notices the math is wrong. If the equation doesn't balance, if delta is not zero, you trigger a vacuum instability. The universe tries to correct the error by collapsing. This leads to a scenario where matter converts instantly to energy to fill the gap, or energy condenses into random matter. It is a cascading collapse. To rewrite history safely, you have to be a perfect accountant. You have to know exactly how many atoms are in the reality you are deleting and exactly how many are in the reality you are pasting in. And you must manage the difference perfectly. You cannot lift a chair while you are sitting on it. In the same way, you cannot change a timeline if you are completely bound by its causality. If you change the past to stop your own birth, you cease to exist. So you can't change the past. This is the paradox loop. To avoid this, the manipulator requires an external observer sanctuary. They need to stand outside the stream of time. In Bleach, places like the Soul King's Palace or the Garganta serve as these dimensional anchors. They are isolated pockets of reality. By standing there, the manipulator is insulated from their own changes. They can look at the universal wave function from the outside. This requires a dimensional isolation barrier. It protects the manipulator from the ripples they create. When they shift timeline A to timeline B, the shockwave hits the barrier and dissipates. Without this anchor, the manipulator would be swept away by the changes they make. They would lose their memories of the original timeline and become just another pawn in the new history. The external observer status is what grants them the godlike perspective necessary to act as an editor of reality rather than a character in the movie. Let us talk about bringing the dead back to life. In Bleach, we see characters survive the things that should kill them. This is a quantum soul resurrection via branch merging. When a character dies in the current timeline, that is a definitive event. To undo it, the manipulator finds a parallel branch where the attack missed or where the defense held. They then performed a controlled merge. They overlay the survival branch onto the death branch. The consciousness is transferred or overwritten, but this creates an ontological paradox. For a moment, the soul exists in a superposition of being both alive and dead. The universe has to decide which is real. The energy cost for this scales with the soul density of the target. A normal human soul is cheap to move. A captain class soul, which is incredibly dense with spiritual matter, costs exponentially more energy to drag from one timeline to another. It takes massive effort to force the universe to accept that this powerful entity is alive when it just saw them die. If you do this messily, you risk soul fragmentation where multiple versions of the same person try to exist in the same space, leading to a breakdown of their identity. The Bleach universe relies on a cycle. Souls move from the human world to the soul society and back. It is a closed loop of water flowing through pipes. Timeline manipulation punches holes in these pipes. When you create new timelines or merge them, you are messing with the population count of souls. If you bring 1,000 soldiers from a different timeline, you now have 1,000 extra souls that the cycle didn't account for. This causes soul overflow. The purification rate of the soul society cannot keep up. It creates a backlog. This imbalance puts pressure on the boundaries between worlds. The manipulator must calibrate the entire mechanism. They have to effectively reprogram the reincarnation cycle to handle variable populations. If they don't, the pressure builds up until reality creates time snaps or dimensional rifts. The universe tries to vent the excess pressure. This affects both the living and the dead. You might get ghosts appearing in the living world or humans fading away. Maintaining the flow of souls is critical for cosmic stability, and timeline manipulation is the biggest threat to that flow. Here is a fascinating problem. Hell. In Bleach, hell is a destination for sinners, but sin is an action. If you rewrite history so the crime never happened, does the soul still belong in hell? This is the condemnation paradox. If a villain kills 1,000 people, they are destined for hell. If Yhwach rewrites time so those people never died, the villain technically committed no crime in the new timeline. But if the soul was already marked, what happens? This creates dimensional stress. Hell's gates are physical barriers that react to spiritual pressure and sin weight. If the history is rewritten, hell experiences a contradiction. It holds a prisoner who is innocent in the current reality. This paradox cracks the barriers. The dimensional fabric of hell requires a certain number of condemned souls to maintain its structural integrity. It needs the pressure of those souls to stay stable. If you release them or erase their sins, the pressure drops and hell might collapse or burst open, releasing ancient prisoners. The manipulator has to decide, do they maintain the moral justice of the old timeline or enforce the innocence of the new one? It's a balancing act between ethics and structural engineering. Weaponizing time is the ultimate offense. We call this existential erasure. It goes beyond killing. It is ancestral erasure. You don't kill the target. You kill their grandfather before their father was born, or you prevent their conception. The mechanism uses a controlled quantum operation to identify the ancestral branches, the root system of a person's existence. The manipulator snips these roots. The result is retroactive elimination. The target doesn't die. They simply never were. This bypasses all conventional defenses. Armor, shield, regeneration, none of it matters if you were never born to use it. However, the energy cost is massive, around 10 to the power of 35 joules per branch erased. And there is a risk of the butterfly effect. Removing one person might change history in ways you didn't predict. You might erase your own ally or create a worse enemy. Advanced applications allow for selective erasure, where you only remove specific memories or abilities, effectively editing the person rather than deleting them. This preserves the individual but neuters the threat. If you want to destroy more than just one person, you use a timeline collision. This is smashing two realities together. You take timeline A, your current reality, and timeline B, a target reality. You find the point where they diverge and you force them to synchronize. This creates attraction forces. The two timelines are pulled together until they occupy the same space. The result is a dimensional collision event. It releases energy equivalent to erasing a solar system, around 10 to the power of 60 joules. Everything at the impact point is annihilated as two sets of physical loss and matter try to occupy the same coordinates. To survive this, you need self-shielding. You need a dimensional pocket to hide in while the universe essentially reboots around you. This is a scorched earth tactic. It leaves nothing behind but a merged, chaotic reality. It is dangerous because the new reality is unpredictable. It might have laws of physics that are hostile to life, but as a weapon, it is unblockable by conventional means. It is a logic bomb thrown at existence. Why fight alone when you can recruit yourself? This is the concept of the multiverse self-army. The manipulator accesses quantum branches where they made different choices. Maybe in one branch they trained in swordsmanship, in another they focused on magic. They open a door and invite these variants into the main timeline. This requires active quantum entanglement maintenance. The universe wants to push these clones apart because they represent contradictory histories. You have to spend energy to glue them together. The cost grows exponentially. One clone is expensive. 1,000 clones is near impossible. There is also temporal clone duration limit. The universe exerts pressure to reconcile the paradox. After a certain window, say 10 minutes, the pressure becomes too great and the clones are forced back to their timelines or erased. It creates a short-term overwhelming force. You effectively become a legion of one, but you have to coordinate perfectly. If the clones disagree or fight, the entanglement destabilizes and the army vanishes. What happens is there are two or more beings with the almighty or similar powers. This leads to quantum conflict. If being A tries to make the coin land on heads and being B tries to make it land on tails and both have absolute power, you get a reality fracture. The equations for this are unsolvable. When n is greater than or equal to 3 manipulators, the system enters a chaotic state. The paradox zones expand at the speed of light. In these zones, cause and effect break down. You might die before you are shot. You might win and lose simultaneously. To prevent this, a cosmic coordination protocol is needed. The manipulators effectively have to form a government or a truce. They have to agree on a consensus reality. I won't touch your timeline if you don't touch mine. Without this agreement, the universe spirals into a computational singularity where nothing is real and everything is noise. It is a stalemate of gods. If you edit a video file too many times, it gets corrupted. The same happens to the universe. We call this corruption the infinite void. It is a dimension of deleted data. When a timeline is erased, the information has to go somewhere. It accumulates in this buffer zone. If the frequency of changes exceeds a critical limit, say a million changes per second, the cracks in reality connect to this void. The void begins to expand. It eats the healthy universe. It is a null space where distance and time don't exist. It contains the fragments of erased people and histories. Navigating the void is risky. You can get trapped in the null space. However, advanced beings can use it as a storage lockers. They can retrieve deleted information or rescue lost souls, but the void is always growing. It is the entropy of the multiverse made manifest. If unchecked, the void eventually consumes all timelines, resulting in total static. To stop the universe from falling apart, we need stabilization mechanisms. The first is quantum anchor points. These are fixed events or people that cannot be changed. They act as tent poles. They require immense personal energy to establish. No matter what changes, the anchor remains. The second is dimensional shielding. This creates a bubble of physics normalization. Inside the shield, the laws of physics are standard. Outside, reality might be warping, but inside, gravity is 9.8 meters per second square. This protects cities or key locations from the ripples of change. The third is the multiversal constitution. This is a set of agreements between high-level beings. Limit changes, preserve free will, avoid destructive alterations. It is a treaty to prevent total reality fracturing. It establishes the rules of engagement for time travel and reality warping. So where does this place a character on the power scale? This is high multiversal level. A character like Yamamoto might burn the surface of a planet. That is a universal threat in terms of raw power over time. But a timeline manipulator is infinitely more dangerous. Yamamoto's destruction is finite, but it happens over time. Timeline manipulation is instantaneous and affects infinite branches. The power source is the vacuum energy collapse, which dwarfs the energy output of a sun. The durability of such a being is irrelevant. You can punch them, but they just rewrite the timeline on the so the punch missed, or they rewrite it so they are standing behind you. Their speed is immeasurable. They operate outside of linear time constraints. To defeat them, you cannot just use force. You have to erase their existence across all quantum branches simultaneously. It is a completely different tier of combat. So, how do you fight this? Let us look at matchups. Versus Ichigo Kurosaki. Ichigo is a raw power. The manipulator's strategy is timeline eraser. Prevent Ichigo from gaining his powers. Stop his mother from meeting his father. It's an instant win via paradox creation. Versus Aizen Sosuke. Aizen is an interesting case. He is immortal and controls perception. This leads to an eternal stalemate. The manipulator rewrites reality, but Aizen creates an illusion of reality. They end up in an infinite recursion loop. Neither can truly kill the other. The timeline constantly rewrites around their conflict. Versus Soul King beings. This is a quantum initiation race. Victory depends on who activates their power first. Since the effect is instantaneous, speed doesn't matter. It is about initiative. It is a wild west duel where the gun is in a reality warping thought. But even gods have limits. The primary constraint is the Soul King's immutable framework. There are constants established by the creator of the universe that cannot be overwritten. The distinction between life and death, the concept of Yhwach, the existence of the soul society, these are hard coded. A manipulator can change events within the rooms, but they cannot change the architecture of the house. They cannot make a reality where souls don't exist. The second constraint is energy. Manipulating higher dimensional space requires energy exceeding the total universal output. It creates an energy paradox. The third is branch family restriction. You can only influence timelines that are related to your own quantum branch. You cannot manipulate a completely alien reality that operates on different physics. You are bound by your own experimental family of timelines. The universe has an immune system. We call it quantum error correction. It uses topological quantum codes. When a timeline is damaged or decoheres, the universe detects the error. It checks the syndrome. It then attempts to restore the state. If a change is too small or too contradictory, the universe rejects it. It reverts to the stable configuration. This is why small changes often fail to alter the future. The universe simply heals the wound. To overcome this, a manipulator needs to overwhelm the error correction. They need to use distributed timeline networks. They spread the change across multiple branches so the universe can't isolate the error. It is like hacking a network by attacking every node at once. This brings us to the role of the observer. No conscious observation means the timeline remains in superposition. As soon as you look, it collapses. The manipulator has to navigate the observer in superposition problem. If they observe the future, they lock it in. But they want to change it. So they must engage in knowing and unknowing. They have to know the outcome to change it, but not observe it so closely that it becomes fixed. This requires automated Reishi quantum gates. These are systems that manipulate the timeline threads without direct human intervention. It allows for unobserved manipulation. The reality is cemented retroactively. It's a delayed choice experiment on a cosmic scale. To keep the magic working, you need coherence. Noise destroys quantum states. The environment, cosmic radiation, gravity waves, spiritual pressure creates noise. The manipulator needs quantum refrigeration. They have to cool the timeline apparatus to near absolute zero. Conceptually speaking, they extract the thermal energy or chaos from the timeline and dump it into adjacent realities. They also use cosmic inflation synchronization. They perform their miracles during specific cosmological phases when space-time is naturally coherent. If they fail, they get decoherence. The timeline dissolves into a static of mess, creating hybrid realities where historical events contradict each other. Thermodynamics is a harsh mistress. The second law says entropy, that is disorder, always increases. Timeline manipulation often tries to decrease entropy, fixing a broken cup and bringing a dead man back. That creates order. To pay for this, you must export the entropy. You have to make another timeline messier. This is the entropy gradient. You select a low entropy timeline, the good one, and you dump all the disorder into a rejected timeline. That rejected timeline accelerates towards heat death. It rots forever. This creates a moral hazard. To save your world, you are condemning a billion other worlds to rapid decay. It creates a global stability threat. If you dump too much trash into the neighbor's yard, eventually the whole neighborhood smells. Time is not a straight line. It creates loops. Closed timeline curves, CTCs. A self-consistent loop is when the effect precedes the cause. You survive because your future self saved you, which allows you to become the future self to save you. Timeline manipulation exploits this, but it causes causality shear. Small changes create exponentially larger effects, non-linear outcomes. The risk is the grandfather paradox. If you break the chain, the loop collapses. The manipulator must ensure consistent chains. They have to carefully construct the loop so it doesn't snap. If they fail, they get fractured reality, where the loop disconnects and the timeline spirals off into nothingness. Information cannot be destroyed. This is a fundamental law. When a timeline is erased, where does the data go? It goes to the compressed timeline graveyard. This is located in the information void or the garganta. The deleted timeline data is compressed into data fragments. We are talking about 10 to the power of 80 bits per fragment. These are digital graveyards. They are holographic records of discarded histories. This implies that spaces like the garganta in Bleach are actually information repositories. They are full of dust of dead worlds. Advanced beings can scan this debris to learn about what was erased. A timeline manipulator is essentially a computer. They use parallel timeline processing. Instead of calculating one outcome, they calculate 10 to the power of 500 outcomes simultaneously. This gives them exponential speed up. They can find the one winning strategy out of a zillion losing ones instantly. This creates predictive ability. The answer exists before the question, but it leads to computational paradoxes. If you know the answer, do you still need to ask the question? The manipulator has to synchronize their knowledge to prevent information loops that would freeze their mind. This is the art of bending luck. We are talking about quantum amplitude adjustment. In a normal world, the default outcome has 99.999% probability. The desired outcome, winning the lottery, has 0.001%. The manipulator uses a quantum gate to shift the amplitude. They swap the numbers. Now winning the lottery is 99.999% likely. This is the butterfly effect weaponized. They make the impossible consistent. This explains the power growth curve in anime. Characters surviving impossible odds isn't plot armor, it is probability manipulation. They are surfing the statistical tail ends of the bell curve. Why fight for resources when you can steal them from a parallel world? This is multiversal resource extraction. You open a quantum extraction gate to a timeline where gold is common or where spiritual energy is abundant. You bring it to your own timeline. But this violates conservation laws. Matter transfer is risky. A safer method is resource replication. You scan the quantum information of the gold in the other timeline and you use local energy to reconstitute it in yours. You are 3D printing the resource using the blueprint from another universe. This avoids the physical transfer violation, but it still drains local energy reserves. To keep the universe running, you need safeguards, paradox detection algorithms. These systems monitor the consistency analysis. They check 10 to the power of 50 variables simultaneously. If a contradiction is found, like a man meeting himself, the system triggers automatic reversion protocols. If it effectively hits undo, it restores the baseline reality. Paradoxes are isolated in dimensional pockets or containment chambers to prevent the contagion from spreading. The power cost for this monitoring is huge. About 30% of the total REARS budget is just spent watching for errors. Smart manipulators save their game. This is quantum state preservation. They create a quantum snapshot of the universe at time t equal to 0. They compress this data and store it in an isolated dimensional storage like the void. If the manipulation goes wrong, they trigger an auto restore. They revert it to the save point. This requires entropy management. The backup degrades over time due to entropy, so it must be refreshed every 10 to the power of 12 operations. It ensures that no mistake is permanent. Finally, the big red button, emergency timeline reversion. If a paradox cascade threatens multiversal collapse, the protocol initiates. It accesses the quantum isolated memory. It executes reverse operations. It unwinds the change. The time limit for this is incredibly short, 10 to the power of minus 30 seconds. You have to catch the vase before it hits the floor. The energy consumption is 90% of reserves. It leaves the manipulator drained and vulnerable, but it saves reality from becoming a disconnected scattering of islands. So we have effectively deconstructed the metaphysics of the Bleach universe to reveal a hard skeleton of quantum mechanics and information theory hiding underneath the spiritual veneer. We now understand that altering the future isn't a mystical decree but a computational operation of staggering complexity. We have seen how powers like the Almighty act essentially as a user interface for manually collapsing the universal wave function, requiring the operator to act as both a limitless energy source tapping into the volatile mechanics of vacuum decay and a hyper advanced quantum computer capable of processing 10 to the power of 122 qubits simultaneously. We have moved past the idea of simple power levels and into the realm of cosmic accounting, realizing that every miracle from resurrecting the dead to erasing an enemy's birth carries a precise thermodynamic cost that must be paid to prevent total reality failure. We have also grasped the terrifying fragility of this system, where the universe itself acts as an immune system trying to reject these changes through quantum error correction and paradox zones, forcing manipulators to exist in isolated dimensional sanctuaries just to maintain their own identity against the tides of causality they unleash. We essentially established that high tier combat in this setting is less about physical durability and more about who has the superior administrative privileges over the database of existence, managing entropy, avoiding causality loops that could shatter the reincarnation cycle, and navigating the structural nightmare of maintaining dimensional barriers when the history that built them is being constantly rewritten.